Do we still need humans? I think yes, we do. The final touch, especially in our industry, has to pass through a human interaction. Now there is a full awareness that the technology is there, is here to stay. So if you are able to envision a problem holistically, then you can decide when you need the technology and when you can solve it in a different ways.
Alessio Delpero, welcome to the Insider Podcast.
Thanks, Marty, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you again to discuss again the latest trend in technology and hospitality.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, artificial intelligence, AI, it's something that none of us in business can ignore. It's important to everything we do, not just in hospitality or luxury, but across the business world. You've already given me the benefit of some insights in the past. And I know that after the last time we spoke, you went to an international symposium on AI and innovation, where some of those sort of key trends were explored. And before we touch on some of those trends, some of those new developments, maybe give me a snapshot of the mood that you discovered there. Were people sort of generally still excited, worried, somewhere between the two? What was your take on the mood at the conference?
That is a very good question, and I must say that I've noticed a change in that conference, in the mood present at that conference vis-a-vis other conferences in the past. So whereas before managers and operators in the tourism and hospitality industry were kind of divided between being maybe skeptical or being totally engaged with the technology, with some of them being more neutral. Now there is a full awareness that the technology is there, is here to stay, and there's nothing we can do to not engage with that. We must engage with the technology for the good or for the bad, in order to keep up with competitors, with the industry, and with the current needs and trends and requirements from the customers and the guests.
Yeah, so there was a real sense of enthusiasm,
Yes.
that was sort of percolating around there, basically.
Absolutely. And even though the summit was about innovation in general, and there were some macro trends like sustainability, AI was ubiquitous and was kind of oftentimes actually linking all the other trends. So it's interesting to see how this technology starts to be envisioned as a potential enabler to hopefully solve problems also in other aspects that have to do with the industry.
Interesting. Now, if we take hospitality particularly, and some of the ways that AI is now getting within the business, one of the keys to great hospitality is personalization, personalized service. Even we use the term hyper personalization now. Taking AI in particular, how are some of the ways in which that is AI is supporting that idea of sort of more personalized customer interactions?
That is a very good question. And to answer that, let me first clarify that I will refer more to AI as the algorithms and the machine learning aspects of AI rather than the large language model that we might be more familiar with because we interact with them on a almost daily basis.
Yeah.
Well, the big advantage is AI and machine learning really helps us to predict trends, to make good data analysis, and from the data really understand nuances and even predict potential patterns or potential behaviors. So by having the history of a guest or of a company, we can use the tool in order to predict what could be potential outcomes, and then the managerial task is to decide which one is the most relevant and how to apply it and how to behave. But at least it gives us more information on customer needs, competitors, behaviors that we can take in general.
Yeah, but in a hospitality sense, it still needs that sort of person at the end of that chain, if you like, to interpret that into what hospitality services, what experiences that could potentially translate into. You need that interface as well.
Absolutely, and that's probably the beauty of tourism and hospitality as an industry itself, that is not pure technology, but the human part still remains predominant. And one of the key aspects that I'm pretty positive we will touch upon later is when should we stop using the technology and imposing the technology to our guests, and when should we instead step back and say, okay, here is the human part. Let's still keep the human in the driving seat of the machine.
Yeah, because humans ultimately understand humans the best.
Right.
And whatever the machine may sort of spit out in terms of sort of predictions, it still helps to have that empathy and that understanding, doesn't it, basically?
Indeed. And is something that yet machine and artificial intelligence cannot achieve.
Yeah.
I'm saying yet because, I might be proven wrong considering how fast the technology is evolving.
Yeah. I mean, this conversation is probably going to be out of date next week, but we'll continue on anyway. But you mentioned this already, and one of the things, we've talked a bit about the human interpretation, but one of the things that humans can't do that AI can is this incredible speed at which it can synthesize and process or gather, synthesize and process information from everywhere and analyzing data. I mean, if you take that core strength of AI, how is that within sort of travel, tourism, luxury? How is that being leveraged to the benefit of organizations that are operating in those sectors?
I would say that we can look at this question from several perspectives. One is really, let's say, the more traditional operators in the industry, like hotel managers, airline companies, that can leverage on the data that they gather to propose a more personalized and tailored experience for the guest, especially if we're talking about maybe guests with more willingness to pay, so high-end people and travelers. On the other hand, the fact that so much information is becoming available at the snap of the fingers, it's also enabling new players to find new spaces within the industries.
Okay.
And what we are seeing, for example, is new artificial intelligence-based digital travel agencies, where the humans in the background are more the software engineers programming the platform rather than the agents really suggesting the product. Now, to what extent the product is reliable is something that we can debate. There's still room for improvement, but it's definitely a direction that the industry is taking. So in other words, also those established companies that maybe back in the days, and I'm thinking, for example, of online tour operators that back in the days used to experience a sort of winner takes all situation because they had this network effect and the ability to have all the complementors and the users on board, now might be a little bit threatened by potential new entrants that have access to the same information that they used to have and can assemble it and play with it in multiple ways.
Yeah. And I suppose applications around experiences, and whether it's a kind of, just to quote a name like Get Your Guide and others that are out there, that's a sort of that trend towards, if you like, having sort of specialized experience sites. I guess that plays into it because then that information is there for these, let's say, AI travel agents, for want of better description. They've got this resource now. They've got that information they can call upon.
Right. The information is there, and I'm daring to say that the machine can assemble it and process it way better than human at this stage. Now, do we still need humans? I think yes, we do. Because, as we were mentioning before, the final touch, especially in our industry, has to pass through a human interaction. We just have to reconsider a little bit our role, which will be less of data processing and information gathering in the traditional way, but more in assessing how to evaluate the output of the AI and what to prioritize and what not, and how to orchestrate, for example, multiple outputs that we're getting. In other words, we should all become more managers and more able to manage the information that we get rather than, let's say, researchers in the sense of doing the dirty work of getting the information.
We still have to steer the guest, steer the customer towards that eventual conclusion. I think that's where you need that human touch to in order to sort of, as you say, to sort of to appeal to them on a more sort of psychological level, not just present them with this kind of AI generated itinerary. There needs to be there's some sell there, isn't there, as well?
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned LLMs, large language models, before, and this is a world that's kind of developing at such incredible pace. So I know, we spoke about 3 or 4 months ago, and the situation is different again. We chatted about that before. But in terms of where we're at right now, sort of 20th of March, 2026, what's the current state of that technology? And in terms of your own experience with using LLMs in your research and your activities, where are we at right now with that world?
Well, I would say that LLMs are what allowed us, common people, to start familiarizing and using the technology, because it's what lowered the interface between the user and the technology. The ability to simply chat with the machine in a simple, very simple way is what really allowed the technology to be adopted and spread so fast in the past few years.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that these models had important gaps until not long ago. Hallucination, fabricated answers. So they had to be handled with cautions. I would say that since the November last year, the new models made a huge leap ahead. Okay. They are way more reliable, the information is way more consistent and way more credible. And the level of hallucination has reduced dramatically, which is very good on one hand, a little bit scary on the other hand. What does still remain to be considered? It's still very important how the human interacts with these models, in the sense that with the initial models, prompt engineering, so how a person asks question, was fundamental to get the right answer.
Well, it became a job in its own right. All of a sudden, there was advertising for that particular role.
Exactly. Prompt engineers. The new models are better in the sense they are better at guessing your intention when you're interacting with them. So what could be a good prompt that you might be willing to write for them. So that's why they're becoming more accurate.
Yeah.
They're still not totally there, but it's getting way better. And what is happening is that even people who have no idea of what prompt engineering is, or have no idea what the temperature of the LLM is, so how much the model can hallucinate or be more analytical, they still can get pretty good answers. And that is really, take everything one level higher with respect to the models that were out last year.
When you said about them getting better, you said that's a bit scary. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's a bit scary because, we know that from the previous model, what happened is that the experts in a field still remain the experts, and they were far ahead of AI in that specific field. What AI was doing is taking non-expert a little bit closer to the expert, but not quite there yet. Now, because these models are becoming so good, the gap between the experts and the non-experts using AI, it's reducing. So it would be interesting to see in a few months or years exactly whether the experts are still much better than a non-expert using AI. And I don't dare making a prediction here. I would still say that because of what we said before, managing the output and assessing the output, having expertise in a field will still help you to interact with the AI, but still the play field is leveling a little bit.
Yeah. Do you use it yourself in your own research activities?
Yeah, I use it a lot, and I mean, it would be silly not to use it. Would be like still manually computing correlations when we have computers that can do that for us. So it's definitely a tool that I'm using. I'm fully aware though that if I'm working on a research project, I am responsible for the output. So what I try to do is to assess the output and make sure that I validate what I get from the machine and double check that is the correct direction. But for brainstorming, for coding, for data gathering, it's a huge help. Another big leap that we experienced lately is the availability of new tools that are LLM based, but that allow researchers, but also managers, to play more in a sandbox environment.
Okay.
So rather than having a bot that is widely searching the internet or searching all the sources, you have the same algorithm, the same predictive model, but you can feed a specific terrain to play with. For example, you can give 10 or 20 articles on a literature to this bot, and then in that case you are sure that the machine is working only with those articles without trying to fish anything.
No fake sources.
No fake sources, precisely. And
interesting.
Notebook LM by Google is one of these great tools that I also use in class with students, because once again, it would be silly not to teach them how to use it, and I think it's wiser to teach them how to use that wisely so that they know what the shortcomings.
Because in that way, you're in effect getting the best out of AI, because you've got all that kind of data crunching power, but you've got no rubbish data going in.
Precisely.
You can trust the source data going in, so you can be much more willing to trust the source data coming out, basically.
Precisely.
Interesting.
I was reading no longer than yesterday an article on HBR about this researcher asking to ChatGPT to predict the performance of companies a few years back, and then they compare how these companies really did. And they used a publicly traded Chinese company, and they compare ChatGPT versus DeepSeek. And the prediction of DeepSeek were way better than ChatGPT, but not because of the model, simply because these were Chinese company, and ChatGPT did not have access to all the information related to this company that the other model had.
Yeah.
As soon as they kind of went one step back and gave more information to ChatGPT, then the two models kind of level each other. That's why it's really important to know what you are feeding to the machine in order to get the proper answer.
But it's interesting that two completely different software platforms, when fed more equivalent information, produced more equivalent outputs. They didn't go off on a tangent, if you like, even though they've been coded separately, they're different products. They still kind of came to roughly the same conclusions.
Yes. In the end, the algorithms behind, yes, they are sophisticated algorithms, but they are models that kind of resemble each other. Some might be more useful in specific settings, others less, but what really makes the difference is the data that the model uses to train itself and to give the answer.
Yeah. Now, one of the complaints you often hear about AI is it doesn't make anything. It's all about analysis. It's all about crunching data. It doesn't. There's sort of no end products. But I understand that, particularly with some of this, the way that LLMs are developing, that this disruptive idea that there could be applications and products that they're now capable of producing, that's around now. Now, I know nothing about that, but I know you know a bit about this. How is that developing?
This is I think that this is the next barrier that is dropping. Exactly what you're pointing out. And let me be a bit philosophical. How often do we not do something because we are afraid of that and we just don't know how it works? But as soon as you've done it, you say, "Oh, that was pretty simple. Let's keep doing it." The same happens, for example, in writing applications. I'm talking about simple applications. Of course, I'm not talking about the expert software engineers. But new products like Google Anti-Gravity, for example, or Cloud Code, they allow you to create softwares, even if you have very little or zero knowledge of languages like Python or other languages that are used out there. So, in my view, this has great potential because allows everybody basically to step into a new world and figure out that things are not as difficult as they might seem, and then trigger more products, more offers, and getting more and more solutions and more services out there.
That's an extraordinary development, really. When the idea we've seen this with 3D printing, and that's still got, I think, a way to go. But that idea that you can make it yourself, but in this way, this is doing this with software, right? So it's a free SaaS product, and that's going to be hugely disruptive.
That is going to be hugely disruptive in two senses. In the sense that we're going to see more products, and again, I'm still saying that the experts are still the experts, so we are not quite there, but we are going to see more products for sure. And mainly what we're going to see is also a reduction in the switching cost for the users of passing from one software to another. Think, for example, if you're a hotel manager and you have to change your PMS, that's a nightmare. It's month and month of migration, headaches. If you have a machine that helps you to do that smoothly, why should you be locked in with your original provider and not try other potential options out there that might be more interesting for you and that you have never considered because switching was way too cumbersome?
Yeah. I said there'd be some CEOs of some software companies having one or two sleepless nights about this, about this trend, I'm sure. But and one of the things that you mentioned that came out of the Seville conferences then, and we've spoken about as well, is that there's definitely more trust. There's more trust. There's more reliability around AI products and services than even say 6 months ago. Should we though still be alert, worried, call it what you will, about things like data poisoning, hallucinations, rogue outputs? I mean, is that still a factor?
That is still a fact. It is still a fact, although it's getting better in the sense that the training set is becoming more and more consistent and validated, but there's still this worry of the fact that, you train with the machine with garbage, and what you get in return is equal garbage. So the issue is still there, but it's getting better. And what is getting better is probably the awareness that exists. So people are starting to become a little bit more savvy in assessing when the issue might emerge in an answer or in an output. And that's also what increases a little bit the trust, in the sense that even though we get the same output, which is not the case, the output is getting better, but we are getting better at assessing whether it's correct or not. And that is what giving more confidence also to people to use it more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And that's why it's now tangible in the industry that everybody knows that we cannot live with that. We have to cope with that and use it for the best. It's not that you cannot have justification as a couple of years ago. I don't trust the data management. That's past. The issue is there, so you have to find a solution so that you solve the issue without not using the technology. So you still have to take advantage of the technology.
Interesting. Now, for my next question, I want to bring together what I feel are kind of the two hottest topics that we've been talking about over the last 3 or 4 years, which is obviously technology, and particularly AI, but also sustainability. I think they're two hot agenda topics, whether you're in tourism, hospitality, or wherever. Do you think AI has potential to help on the sustainability side, maybe with sort of behavioral things and sort of managing tourism destinations? Where do you think AI can come in on the sustainability side and actually make a difference?
That is a very good point. And as I was mentioning before, also at this conference, I've noticed that AI was kind of used as the enabler to solve multiple problems, and sustainability was one of them. I followed a very interesting panel. And the guest speaker was the manager of Corsica as a destination. And the example that he brought on the table is how they use AI, the ability to predict behaviors of AI, in collaboration with Orange, the phone company in France, to trace people that land in the island and predict the flow of crowds. And by doing that, they could have a sort of a preview of the spots that could potentially become overcrowded and enact on that by suggesting maybe alternative destination or suggesting potential overcrowd and so mentioning and alerting people that there might be the issue. And with that, they could basically indirectly, via feeds, steer the movements of crowds in the island.
Bottlenecks, basically.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's, if we think of how often we hear the topic of overtourism, overcrowd, this is a very simple and strategic way to use it. I mean, and this is just probably the lowest hanging fruit. There are many multiple ways that we can use the data analysis and data prediction to steer.
But a lot of people try, and I've done it myself. If you go to a destination, a different country you're not really particularly familiar with, you'll very often sort of download the app, download the tourism app, the kind of welcome to wherever app for suggestions and offers. I mean, you only got to put a few dining offers in there, and most people will be up for doing that. So you've got the technology there to communicate with people.
Exactly.
You can just bring it all together through the network. That's absolutely amazing.
And if you think about it, it's as simple as Google Maps. If Google Maps suggests you that a road is red and there's a lot of traffic, maybe you take a detour and go somewhere else.
Absolutely right. But also, I've used Google Maps in a city centre, and there's no question you get suggested certain pubs, bars, restaurants that have clearly got some sort of thing with Google. Because you see other ones, say like the one I was actually looking for, doesn't even come up.
Right.
Because they've probably not paid any money to Google. So it's all part of that world, isn't it, basically?
And here we could be a little bit philosophical and saying, okay, do I really want the AI to give me personalized suggestions? And that's a personal opinion. My personal opinion is if I need to get suggestions because I have to absorb advertising somehow, then I prefer it to be tailored for my needs than not. Okay.
Yeah.
Another topic, if okay, I'm paying for an app and I don't want to be bothered with advertising or things like that.
Yeah.
But in the moment when we are willing to be exposed to personalization, then it's better to have it than not.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, looking ahead, and I know it's always difficult to look ahead when you're talking about a topic which is changing so rapidly, but in terms of the sort of AI-powered applications, the tools that are maybe only just coming out now, or you can see on the horizon, what do you think are going to be the sort of smash hits that maybe over the next sort of 3-6 months we're gonna start using?
Well, what I have start playing with a little bit is Google Anti-Gravity, for example, which is one of the new tools by Google and is agentic AI. So it's a software that allows you to create whatever task and fully delegate the task to the machine. Whatever that is, being writing a software or planning your holiday.
Yeah.
And you can decide the degrees of freedom that you want to give to the machine. It could be fully autonomous, or it could interact with you to touch base on specific capstone part of this task. And I found that fascinating because it means that while I'm doing my work, I can also plan my family holiday in the background, having this software doing that.
And it can literally go from A to Z without consulting you if you want.
If you want, yes.
Wow.
That's possible. I would maybe discourage you to start with this option. Maybe, make sure that you check all the steps in light of what we said before. But in principle, it's possible.
It's incredible.
And it's a tool that is there. It's free. It's available. Claude has its own version. This is, I think, is going to be the next game changer in the short run for common users.
Yeah, it's just an extraordinary thought. Just a self-starting AI project creator.
Yes,
it's extraordinary.
Fascinating.
Anything else? Any other tools that you think are? I mean, that's a pretty big one, to be fair. Any other sort of more, perhaps sort of slightly lower level of impact that?
No, the other aspect that I'm seeing is, the example that I made is a sort of a general purpose technology tool, so something that is open to everybody. What we are seeing is tools that are becoming more and more tailored for specific needs. And that then require specific data to be trained off. And this is probably very interesting in a B2B setting. So when you have a company, you don't want to use a generic tool. What you want to use is a tool that is specifically tailored for your need, for your data, and gives you the output of what is actually relevant for you in general. But here we are entering a domain, a very nuanced domain with several different startup, oftentimes initiatives available.
So it's more. You're getting sort of into the deepness of the tech there.
Right.
So let's just sort of pull us out of the deepness of the tech a little bit and just revert back to our first love, hospitality, and the business of hospitality. Now we've talked about how AI can contribute to some of those things, personalization, etc. And in the way that hotels and restaurants interact with their guests. From your perspective, there's obviously got to be a balance there between the human and the tech-enabled stuff. Where do you see the balance between that idea of hyper-personalization, but also keeping the human touch? How should operators go about doing that?
That is a very good question, and I would answer it along two dimensions. The first one is three dimensions, actually. The first one is understanding your customers. Not everyone is interesting in personalization, or even less in having the technology superimposed by a hotel or whatever company you're dealing with. So try to really understand whether your customers are, and your value proposition is more on the technology side or the human touch side. I would say that for managers would be still a source of differentiation in the tourism and hospitality industry. The second dimension is, even if you are using the technology, because even if you are on the human side and not on the technology side, it's very unlikely that you can refrain from using the technology. It's so important and so useful that eventually you will have to get your hands dirty with that. If that is the case, then you should really be careful in assessing how you will have the guests interacting with the technology. Ideally, you can keep it behind the scene so that it's not perceived by the guest, and the guests have a smooth, human-based experience, even though it's helped and supported by the use of AI. And this is a delicate balance that I think in hospitality and in travel, we should aim to achieve.
Yeah, and of course that balance changes at the price point, the luxury level, from kind of mass market to ultra lux. There's going to be a different balance all the way up that line, isn't there?
Absolutely. And the ability of the managers is precisely assessing where that balance stands, and not using a one-size-fits-all approach, but really understand your customer, understand your product, and try to find the fit between the two.
Yeah.
Which also takes me to the third dimension, and I'm going to be a little bit academic on this. Since the research by Jay Barney on the research-based view of the firm, we know that competitive advantage comes from companies that have resources and access to resources that other companies don't have. And knowledge used to be one of them, a key resource. Now that the knowledge is available to everybody and can be processed with the same algorithms for everybody, well, the resource itself may no longer be the source of a competitive advantage. So what is the source of the competitive advantage? Well, in my view, it's still the human part. So the decisions on how to use that knowledge so that it fits your product and it fits your customer and hopefully sets you apart from competitors and allows you to carve your space in the competitive environment.
Yeah.
So the managerial approach of coordinating and orchestrating the output of AI, it's still super prevalent.
Interesting. I suppose if you were to say there's a fourth dimension, I guess generational change might be it. I mean, I'm of the generation that still remembers life before the internet and before smartphones, with a great deal of, nostalgia. But my own son, the students we see walking around Glion, obviously glued to their phones. My son is no different at his university. So there's a change there, isn't there? We have a digital generation coming through now, and they will be tomorrow's customers. How much of an impact is that going to have? Is that as this starts to percolate through, is that going to change the game?
I think it will, indeed, and because it will change the customer needs. And I mean, I'm speculating a little bit about the future here, so
sure,
handle with care. But
it's allowed.
The way I envision this is let's say, luxury generation that is a little bit more our age and still remembers the no phone days and maybe still looking for the no phone days when traveling or when experiencing hospitality, will eventually step by step be replaced physiologically by this younger generation, which are digitally native and have been dealing with the phones all their life. So their perception of technology being invasive is way higher than for our generation. So
absolutely.
In my view, the balance that we were discussing before is probably gonna change and adapt with the generation as time evolves.
Yeah. But they will still value the human-to-human interaction. I don't think that's going to change, though.
Agree.
Maybe done in a different way, maybe perhaps a little bit more superficial than we might have been used to. But it will stay, though, won't it?
I would agree with this.
Yeah.
Probably the modes of interaction are going to change, but the human interaction is still going to be there. Absolutely.
Yeah. My final question is, again, a little bit more of a sort of business philosophy one, really. In terms of how businesses and operators in hospitality, let's say, or luxury or whatever, how do they go about ensuring that this wonderful technology, ever-changing technology, ever-advancing technology, does become a legitimate problem solver for them, instead of perhaps what it can sometimes be, which is a solution in search of a problem? How do they go about doing that?
That is a great question. Sometimes we tend to over-engineer solutions using technologies when there is no need, and the solutions are way simpler than what we think. Well, I would say that here it all boils down to the managerial experience and managers that really know their industry, their product, and their customer. And let me be a bit philosophical in answering this question. Whereas some years ago, I was really an advocate of rigorous scientific formation, like, STEM sciences as being, the most relevant sciences. That if I had to suggest my daughter what to study, go for a STEM topic because they hard fact, the teachers. Now I'm changing a little bit my mind. I'm going back to the humanistic side of things, like more philosophy, more Latin history, knowing more about humans, their needs, their psychology, and being able to see problems holistically, not just on a specific point. Because if you are able to envision a problem holistically, then you can decide when you need the technology and when you can solve it in a different ways. If you're too trapped on a specific sector or topic, you tend to copy-paste that approach to anything that you have in front of you, which means using AI to solve even the silliest things.
Oh, interesting. So think big, basically.
Yes.
Think big and think human.
And think human, exactly. And this is also our role as business schools, I would say, because we are forming these managers for the future. And we must be sure that they are trained on the technology, that they understand the technology, but they also understand the big picture.
Yeah.
That's why I think that most of the courses that we are teaching here are still very relevant to form managers that really can see the problem holistically and not just, in specific bits and pieces.
Yeah. So basically, it's treat AI as your servant. Don't let it be your master.
Precisely. Interesting enough, I was rewatching The Matrix a few years ago, which is, I think, 1999, if I recall correctly. And there is the scene when Agent Smith captures Morpheus and he starts this monologue and he says, yeah, it was your civilization until you delegate your thinking to us. Then it became our civilization. And I think that is super actual and, reflects really what we tend to do often. Delegate the thinking rather than delegate the monkey job to the technology.
Yeah. Way ahead of its time in that philosophy.
Way ahead of its time, absolutely.
Fantastic. Alessio Delpero, thank you so much for your time and for your contribution to the Insider Podcast.
It was a pleasure, as always. All the best and all the best to the listener.
Thank you.